I've spoken of a shining city all my political life.
We shall be as a city upon a hill.
Shining city upon a hill.
A shining city on a hill.
This shining city on a hill. I've thought a bit of the shining city upon a hill. The phrase comes from John Winthrop, who wrote it to describe the America he imagined. What he imagined was important because he was an early pilgrim, an early freedom man.
Actually, John Winthrop never said shining. He just said city on a hill. It was Reagan who added the shininess. It was 1630 when John Winthrop said, quote, For we must consider that we shall be as a city upon a hill, the eyes of all people are upon us. Winthrop was talking about the Massachusetts Bay Colony, which he was sailing over to establish with his fellow Puritans. At the start of Sarah Vowell's book, The Wordy Shipmates, which is about the Puritans, as the sort of frontispiece of her book, inexplicably with no caption, there's this. And I thought at first that this was maybe something funny that Sarah Vowell drew herself. It is not. It turns out that the Puritans, the Pilgrims, the founders of our country, John Winthrop et al., established their foothold here under this seal. This official Massachusetts Bay Colony seal, which features a whack cartoon Indian missing an armpit with a cartoon word bubble coming out of his mouth that says, "Come over and help us." Come over and help us? That was the idea? Native Americans saying, hey, English people, come over to Massachusetts and help us? Joining us now is someone who's writing about American history, is something in which I take great pleasure. Her book is The Wordy Shipmates. It's just out in paperback, and it's great. Sarah Vowell, thank you for stopping by.
Thanks, Rachel.
Did they really think that Native Americans were psyched for British people to come over and help us, this whole greeted as liberators thing?
Who wouldn't be, you know? That's, of course, as I'm sure you know, it's a reference to St. Paul, who had a vision that the Macedonians wanted him to come over and help them. And this is, in fact, the real seal of the Bay Colony. And I think it signifies how they thought of themselves, you know, as, you know, coming over to help, whether anyone wanted their help or not. And I feel like this is probably one of their most important bequests to us as Americans, this kind of missionary zeal. Although just as importantly, I think, you know, the seal of New Netherland, where we are sitting right now, was, that was a picture of a beaver surrounded by a string of wampum, which is, you know, native money. So that's probably just as indicative of who we became as that one.
New York was about loot, and Massachusetts was impugning weird motives for rescue fantasies onto people we didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, that does seem naive, and I'm just so drawn to that seal. I should stop looking at it. I should pay attention to you.
No, it's fine. It's more interesting. Yeah. I thought you drew it.
You know, that is still the seal of Massachusetts. They just took off the come over and help us banner. It's still the Indian. But, you know, one of the things the English colonists did when they came over to help is eventually, you know, during the Pequot War, they burned alive 800 men, women, and children of, you know, Pequot descent, and so I guess that
makes the come over and help us thing a little harder to keep on the seal.
Yeah, but you know, we're still doing that. We've always done that throughout our history. We like, you know, how we liberated Cuba, which I'm sure would be news to Cuba. And, you know, the last few years we've been helping out all over the world, and so I think that idea of themselves as, you know, chosen by God to save the world, we sort of inherited. But I think one thing we lost, and certainly maybe President Reagan never really followed through on this, is in that sermon of Winthrop's when he's calling for his shipmates to become as a city upon a hill. What he's saying is that they could fail. And to him, he defines this failure as a failure to take care of one another. The sermon is called The Model of Christian Charity, and it's actually all about generosity and sharing with your neighbors.
Well, yeah, I mean, you describe this as one of the most beautiful sentences in the English language. We must delight in each other, make others' condition our own, rejoice together, mourn together, labor and suffer together, always having before our eyes our commission and community in the work, our community as members of the same body. And you single that out as a beautiful thing. It's also a very un-Reaganism
sort of thing.
Yeah, it doesn't really jibe with, slashing the housing and urban development budget and cutting school lunch programs and things like that. But that image of, themselves as members of the same body, it's so powerful and so beautiful and it's so Christ-like. And, I kept thinking about it a lot after September 11th here in New York, how there was so much solidarity and real neighborliness and real civic love. And not only that, we were sort of literally members of the same body. We were breathing the air that was our, incinerated fellow citizens. So this sermon is just much more deeper and beautiful. It has a dark side, too, I think, this ideal of theirs of community. And Winthrop wrote that sermon. He was the governor, but he had yet to govern when he delivered the sermon. And when he got to Massachusetts and as governor, his vision of that community and holding it together was to, banish and punish anyone who stuck out or spoke up or disagreed with the magistrates and the clergy. He kicked out a lot of people who were rabble-rousers. One guy, they sliced off his ears, which was kind of extreme even for the time. So I guess everything costs something.
Sarah Vowell, the new book is, the new paperback version of The Wordy Shipmates is just out. I think it's great.
I'm going to end on ear slicing.
You're going to end on ear slicing. I was going to say it's like metaphorical amputation, the banishment, but then you went right for the literal amputation, and so we're just going to leave it there.
Yeah, but speaking of that, if anyone's watching this, I loved your coworkers hour before this, so you should watch that if it's still in repeats or recorded or something. Talk about taking care of one another.
It is coming up next on Countdown, which is what I'm supposed to say right now. Spectacular.
It's what the First Amendment is for.